I'll tell you, when I was secretary, I passed five big regulations, two of which were fought tooth and nail by the gas industry and the coal industry and the whole Pennsylvania business community, with the exception of the water companies. Two. And I went to war with those guys over that. And I'm proud that I was on the side of the water companies and the environmental community, and we actually got them passed. Now, words on a page only mean so much. And in fact, they don't mean much at all if you don't enforce them. And there's lots of ways of not enforcing. Yeah, there's lots of ways of not enforcing. You can have too few staff, or you can have a lot of staff and just tell them, see no evil, hear no evil. And that happens. But you look at when I was secretary, we issued 1,200 violations to the gas industry in 1 year. 1,200. I more than doubled. I walked through the doors in September 2008 at Rachel Carson. And I asked, what are we doing on gas? And I didn't like where we were at. And I asked how many people we had in the oil and gas bureau. 88. I said, that's nowhere near enough. It's basically what we've had historically in Pennsylvania. We hired to 210. I've already said as part of my drilling plan, we'd hire another 105 and then see if more are needed. Probably more are needed to do that, increase the oversight staff. So that's what I did when I had the authority. That's what I would do again if I had the authority. And you might not think because I haven't said I would support the whole moratorium that the gas industry, quote unquote, likes me. You don't get their support by doing all the things that I've said and done here. Believe me. And you don't get their support by working hard to tax them at West Virginia rate. Those are fighting words across the board with this industry. It's one of the reasons why some of them are walking around Harrisburg saying anybody but Hangar. They also know I know what I'm talking about, and I'm not going to get fooled by these guys. So, I fought them once when they're wrong, and I'll fight them again when they're wrong. But I'll tell you, because I'm not going to pander to anybody, once in a while, they may be right about something, and then I'll say that. But I have no concerns about fighting them. I have in the past, and I'll do it again.
Yeah, what gets me, this thing is not just Pennsylvania, it's in all quarters of Pennsylvania. The resistance against all the laws that aren't being held up, all the activities by the gas companies. It's happening in Texas. Actually, we was in Williamsport a number of weeks ago, and they had a Democratic caucus. Was that what that was referred to as?
The Democratic committee meeting.
Yeah, and those politicians' goal was to make Pennsylvania the next Texas and Saudi Arabia. That was their goal.
Well, let me talk about that, because that's crazy talk, and I've heard it too. And I've heard it from the governor, and I've heard it from others. Pennsylvania is Texas. The governor even said that to an address of the legislature in a budget address. That's what was his goal. Yeah. Actually, I think he's trying to make us both Texas and Mississippi. I don't want to be either one. Very frankly, he's destroying our schools. He wants to make us like Mississippi. And on energy, I wish he had as much support for the wind industry as Texas seems to have. He's worse than Texas on energy, and that's not saying much. Okay. So that is crazy talk, and it's crazy talk because in another very important way. And I've said this time and time again. You get into fights on the facts about everything in this issue. And look, I understand it, and I just try to sort it out, and I tell people where I am and why. And I'm willing to listen and move when evidence is provided to move. So on this issue of job creation, the range is from like 10,000 jobs or 12,000 jobs all the way up to 240,000, which the industry constantly promotes, and some people in the corporate administration constantly promote. Again, there's no separation between the industry and the corporate administration on this point. And the 240,000 number is a joke. It's not accurate, but very frankly, the 12,000 number, as far as I can tell, is equally inaccurate. The number I've been using, and I want to be clear what I mean by this, it's both direct and indirect employment. I say around 100,000. And I say, all right, let's put that number in context. It's if you have one of the 100,000 jobs, it's It's all that matters. And I'm not running around Pennsylvania trying to put people out of work, including those folks. But we need 6.5 million jobs to be at full employment in Pennsylvania. 6.5 million, 6.5 million. So the number that I use, 100,000, means the gas industry has provided directly and indirectly, including waitresses and others who aren't really part of the gas industry but have a job as a result of the activity that's going on. That's less than 2% of all the jobs we need. We're not North Dakota either. We shouldn't be Texas or Mississippi, and we're not going to be North Dakota. North Dakota is a small state, 600,000 people. You plop 100,000 jobs into North Dakota, you've made a huge difference to the economy of that state. You do that here, it's a boost in some areas, but it's not going to bring broad prosperity to all Pennsylvanians. It's one of the reasons why I've come forward with a jobs plan that starts with transportation and includes healthcare, includes education, includes renewables and energy efficiency. There's a lot of jobs that can be created there. So you've been patient.
Yeah, there's a state representative down in southeast PA that's been very loud, blowing his horn very loud about the idea of piping the gas down, liquefying it, I guess, and piping it down to save the refineries. Now, understandably, down there, Marcus Hook and Philadelphia refineries, he's seeing this as, I guess, a political move to argue, about. So, what we're talking about, if this is a long-term industry or a transitional fuel, we got, like I'm saying, to get into the political world, and you got somebody trying to make a political name, talking about how he's going to bring this stuff down. So that means an area in Delaware County and Philadelphia where they're not even drilling at all, we still face the possibility of pipelines. Also, in the northeast part of PA, we have them wanting to put in pipelines to pipe across to Jersey or New York. And the reason is they want to liquefy it. The industry, I've heard them say this, their purpose, they're looking at this as a global commodity, a global resource that they want to liquefy and ship it to China or wherever the market will pay the most. So as governor, what would you think about us, transitioning the state into an industrial state in order to ship stuff out to the other? That's not really what the purpose of the resource.
Look, the four traditional energy choices. It's hard for me to even say this. I would prefer that since we're going to, they're here, they're going to be produced. I would prefer that we use the energy here, and recognizing that there are some impacts by doing them. But I don't think it's right for us to import oil from Nigeria and wreck their environment. It also has other major problems. When we start importing it from the Middle East, it's even worse because we end up sending men and women over there to fight for it. So I'm in the camp that I want to maximize its benefits. And for me, that's trying to put it to use here as much as possible. But, and this is a very, very, very important point, I want to accelerate renewables and energy efficiency. That's what my life has been about for the last 15 years.
Well, I totally agree with that. But the thing is, if we're subsidizing this other industry to come in, and one of the weak points about saying, well, these other industries and this is another gas industry is like nuclear or like oil or whatever. The problem is the infrastructure is already there for these other industries, and we know that there are problems, and we know what the problems are, and we can probably improve them as we phase them out. We don't know. We're only just learning now in the last 2 years what some of these problems are, and they haven't even really happened yet. They don't even have the pipeline infrastructure installed that they're planning on all over the state.
Yeah. Look, I've been in so many forums over the years where my advocacy for renewables has been attacked because, quote unquote, I'm coming forward and arguing for a subsidy. And it's sort of like when people tell me that, I'm saying, because it's usually coming from somebody in the coal industry or somebody else, and I'm saying, are you kidding me? You guys have been having subsidies for a long time, including to this day. Very frankly, and I'm not here to quote unquote bash any of these fuels, and that's not my point. My point is because I use them, and But very frankly, nuclear has got enormous subsidies. Just incredible amounts of subsidy just to even build a nuclear plant. But the same is true with oil and gas and coal. And I have said time and time again that I support federal changes to stop the subsidization at the federal level of fossil fuels. It's often done through the tax code.
All right, Dean Marshall, Columbia County. I first just want to take issue with a comment you made a few minutes ago about soot, because 4 years ago they drilled a gas well near my home, and I can tell you that the thousands of trucks and the diesel generators and the drilling equipment and the operation and the flaring and everything that went along with it produced a lot of soot.
You're absolutely right.
And
It's a good point.
that's one well.
Yeah, it's a good point.
That's also a well, and this gentleman had a good point, that's also a well that they put 6 or 7 million gallons of water in this well, trying to stimulate it, and 7,800 gallons of proprietary chemical substances, which they reported. We don't know about any other chemicals on the site because we don't have the right to know in Pennsylvania. At any rate, my question is more about your stand on a moratorium on drilling, hydrofracking, let's say, in the state forests. I've been going to the Loyalsock State Forest for 38 years. Made some really beautiful memories there with my family, with my friends.
I think I've read about one of those memories.
Well, at any rate,
That made me count.
I can't back a candidate.
Sorry.
My question next.
I can't. Right. I've never been to a flat rock in the Loggers Path, but I've made some nice memories on the eastern side of the Loyalsock, and
We gotta have a little humor.
and what wasn't funny was, and I believe you were still, your tenure was still in with the department, when I went up to my campsite at the old CCC camp for a Memorial Day camp out, and this is something I do like a retreat every year on Memorial Day, and New York State Oil and Gas is coming right through my campsite doing seismic testing. I know the state forest has had vertical drilling for many years to sort of offset their budget, but it just came to my attention today that we've passed a point now where the DCNR's budget is
Yeah.
propped up more by the gas royalties than it is from the state. Now, what kind of a guarantee can you give us? I mean, I can't see myself voting for a candidate who would not immediately ban any hydrofracking, any more hydrofracking, and any current
Well,
work
look,
in the
I've got
state
a
forest,
couple-
and support a moratorium statewide while studies are done about the health
Well,
impacts.
Look, let a couple things. I was the Secretary of the Department of Environmental Protection, not the Secretary of the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. DCNR had control over the state forests. I worked with John Quigley, who I think is a great guy, and I think he did a really good job in a very tough situation. So he and I wrote the moratorium on state forests. We actually had the bill passed twice by the House when the Democrats controlled it. Passed the House twice by 150 to 50, went to the Republican Senate, and never got a vote. Never got a vote. The Democrats actually passed that bill twice. They passed the drilling tax twice. I don't buy this argument that I hear there's no difference between the parties. There's a difference between the parties, maybe not as big as some people might want. That's a fair point. But to say there's no difference is just wrong. They passed that twice. So in terms of the state forest, I absolutely support that moratorium and would extend it and implement it aggressively. And
A moratorium, not a ban.
can
can you qualify the difference?
No more leasing of the state forest.
Right.
I mean, very frankly, where you try to go back now and rip up those leases, you get thrown out of court on your ear. That's right or wrong, that's water over the bridge, but no more. And that was the point of but one of the major reasons why that was issued is because the professional biologists came along and said, any further leasing of the state forest will cause the sustainable forestry certification to be lost. And that's something that I care about because of the ecological impact. It's also something I care about because it actually has an economic impact on a lot of forest-related products and jobs. There's a lot of jobs related to that forest being managed in a sustainable way, and having that certification is critical to keeping those jobs. So for both of those reasons, I absolutely support that moratorium and would continue it in place. I also have a real plan to continue to deal with a very real threat of drilling in state parks. We talked about that earlier, and it's on my website, but what I would do is create an impact fee just for state parks. Because I think if you just quote-unquote banned it in a state park, you'd probably lose in court, because there's a private property interest involved when the mineral owner is private. So I believe that it's important to recognize that drilling in a state park has a huge impact on the state park and what it represents, and that it should have a price associated with it that must be considered as part of that process. Now, if I can get some stronger answer than that, I'm all for it. But I'm not going to also play the game that, very frankly, the governor plays. The governor comes forward and says, "Oh, I'm suing the NCAA. Aren't I a great guy?" And you saw what happened. He had a nice press conference. He went to State College. He had all the folks who hated the NCAA, and I'm one of them, cheering. I wasn't cheering because I actually knew the lawsuit was not going to work. Yeah, it was a joke. It was another cruel piece of misleadership, raising people's expectations. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to come forward and say I've got the way of protecting the state parks when I know that it ain't going to work as soon as it hits a court. So I believe I've come up with a way that can work and that can survive judicial challenge. I think actually him, then you, John. I took.
I know the Rock.
Anyway, Kevin Heatley, you might remember me. I don't know if you remember. We testified. You were on one of the testifiers at the House Democratic Policy Committee meeting on the Marcellus a couple of months ago. I was one of the others. While you spent 29 years working as a lawyer with a focus on energy issues, I wasted 29 years at the same time working as an environmental scientist. So I do understand these issues probably better than most of the people that are in the movement. And I'm not in the movement. I'm just somebody that understands what's going on here. And I'm not going to try and convince you to change your opinion, because it's not going to happen. I understand where you're coming from. I understand your perspective, as you understand mine. Well, you probably will. But what I'm going to say is that what you're doing, what you've presented to these people, is classic false dichotomies and false equivalencies. You've presented that we don't have any choices, and you've presented that all the choices are bad. And quite frankly, when you say you are not pro or anti the big fossil fuels, including nuclear, we'll throw nuclear in there, you're actually for. You can't walk the fence on that. You're either for or against them. And they're not all equivalent. Yes, you will kill birds with big wind. Nobody ever mentions decentralized power. It's always a central component. Oh, we're going to have big wind. Not small wind, we're going to have big wind. We do have choices. And the market will work if we don't subsidize the things that aren't working. This gentleman's point over here was exactly what brought me into this movement. We are going down a path with the infrastructure placement without full information. We've already made mistakes with coal, we've already made mistakes with nuclear, we've already made mistakes with oil. Another bad thing is not a good idea. It's the same thing with how you're presenting your campaign. You're not presenting yourself as good, you're presenting yourself as the least bad, at least in the way you're presenting it today. And I'm not saying you're a bad person, I'm not attacking you personally, I'm just saying your position on this is not supportable. And one of the things, I'll just give you one simple, basically it comes down to this. Your opposition to a moratorium does not make any sense based on what you're telling us you understand, that we don't have all the information. So to oppose the precautionary principle and to say we're going to just go ahead and do it and we're going to try and regulate it as best we can before we even understand, because it is not a matter of monitoring. We don't know if it's a linear pattern, if it's a linear process. We may go over a threshold, like this other gentleman mentioned about climate change, and then there is no going back over that waterfall. I'll give you one specific concrete example. And I could spend, the next 2 hours talking about how we haven't, from the ecological impacts, we haven't quantified them. It's too late already. If you can stop and say, okay, the other 700,000 acres, we're not going to leave. It's too damn late. Most of the forests are in private hands, and they're getting trashed. And the 700,000 acres is getting trashed that's already been leased. And it's too late, because the ecological integrity will be lost. I'll guarantee that. That's what I do for a living. But I'll give you one concrete example, and you can address this how best you want to, that I never hear brought up, but I bring it up to the industry, and they won't answer it. Okay, we know that these concrete and steel plugs are not going to last indefinitely. You brought up nuclear fuel and where we're going to put that, and that's a good point. It's exactly the same thing. We're pumping this material into these aquifers under pressure. We know they're going to continue to migrate up to the surface. We're not getting all that material back up. It's still under pressure. The concrete and steel is not going to last indefinitely. Aquifer contamination is guaranteed from every goddamn well unless somebody is going to monitor and replug them in perpetuity. Now, who is going to pay for that? And what we're doing, if we don't have a plan, which the industries will not, we are passing those costs off to those little kids who are going to burn to death, like your example of the candles. These are little kids in the future, 100, 500 years, 1,000 years in the future, that are going to need that water, that are going to be exposed because of our stupidity and because we wouldn't bite the bullet and do the rational thing like New York State and hold off on it, or even like the Delaware River Basin Commission and hold off on it. No, we're going to go ahead and not do a moratorium. Basically comes down to this: if you do not support a moratorium, it makes no sense, and you will lose, and we will make sure you lose.
Well, look, I really respect what you're saying. We disagree about some very important facts, very frankly. We can go around and around.
I don't think we disagree on any facts at all. I think
Well,
we just disagree
hold on.
on how.
I listened to you. Can I?
Yeah, only if you're going to tell me exactly, if you're going to frame it in the right way. If you're going to say we disagree on facts and we don't, you haven't presented any facts that I don't disagree with.
Can I now?
Absolutely.
Thank you. I think we do disagree on a number of facts, and I'll go through some of them. The first is, I have said repeatedly that I'm for accelerating renewables, but I'm not going to look at you and say that somehow or another, were we to turn off all the nukes tonight, or all the gas tonight, or all the coal tonight, or all the oil tonight, that renewables would take their place within 5 years or 10 years. It won't. And telling people it will is very frankly false.
I did not say that.
Well, hold on. So there are some horrendous trade-offs that have to happen. And if you're saying that somehow or another gas is worse than burning coal, I don't agree. And
I did not say that either.
Well, hold on. So if what the effect of shutting down the gas industry is not immediately having it taken place by renewables, you have to come to grips with what will take its place and what will be the impacts. And very frankly, I don't want to see more mercury, lead, and arsenic in the air, and that will be the result. I don't want to see NOx and SOx go up in aggregate, and that will be the result. It's already happening in the U.S. as coal starts knocking back gas in our electric generation mix. The emissions are going up as a result. I'm not talking about necessarily carbon or methane. I'm talking about the other emissions that we've been regulating under the Clean Air Act forever. They're going back up as a result of that.
So what we're not disagreeing on facts, what we're disagreeing on a value judgment. You've already made a value judgment that, in your opinion, these impacts are not as bad. You'll agree that we don't even know the full impacts of the natural gas industry because we don't have the full infrastructure in place. And so you've already made a value judgment, not a factual, a value judgment that you believe that the mercury and those are all very bad things. Don't get me wrong. I agree with you 100% on that. But you've decided, as most of these people have in the political world, some of them maybe not with as much integrity, and I will give you the integrity because I do think you're a man of integrity, but you've made a value judgment that the unknown is somehow less of a problem than the known.
Well, I don't believe that it's quote-unquote unknown. I don't believe that we have perfect knowledge, that's true. And we don't have perfect knowledge about a number of things that we're using in energy. You know, we don't have perfect knowledge about every single one of these things and their impacts. We know now that 1% of the world's nuclear reactors that have been built have melted down catastrophically. That's an incredibly scary number. 1% of the world's nuclear plants have melted down. So there is a degree of knowledge about all of these risks, and it's not the case that I say don't do anything about any of them. I'm saying the exact opposite. I'm saying do everything possible to reduce these risks, whether it's nuclear or coal or oil or natural gas. I absolutely agree that we ought to be doing things to reduce these risks.
Yeah,
Actually, John was next,
Oh,
and
okay, go
then
ahead.
Dory.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm not going to debate the science, that there's other people far more qualified than myself that can do that. I'm just, I guess what I'm focusing on are certain points. Right now, in this country, in this state, we do not have an energy crisis. We have a supply that far outweighs the demand. We have unquantifiable, unintended consequences. I understand what you and many of our legislators are trying to do is find a balance between the impacts and the economic benefits. And I hear talk about jobs. The interesting thing is the ancillary jobs, as in waitresses and hotel, they were there before. They, they existed before. They didn't crop up. On the other hand, we do have businesses. Bradford County, for instance, I live in Sullivan County, but I'm not far. Bradford County lost 900 jobs when Mastercraft left because they could no longer get hardwood, because the industry was using it up, grind it into sawdust, soak up spills. They ended up leaving. You had 2 quarries in Bradford County that went bankrupt because the industry was not paying the bills for the crushed stone. Chesapeake ended up absorbing those and laid off local workers. In Sheshwin Township in Bradford County, 4 years ago there were 39 producing family farms. Now there are 4. But yet, it's not because they're making so much money off of leasing their land, they're not farming. They're not farming anymore because they've gone bankrupt. Their farms have become non-productive. They're not even seeing the royalties. Now, I think, further the point I'm making is when you go back 4 or 5 years ago, we went from 7th in job creation to 49th, which has to be a telling point that with the onslaught of this industry in this state, it has cost more jobs than it has created. I think you're going to see a tremendous loss in the tourist trade, in forestry, agriculture, certainly new home building. No one wants to live in an industrial zone. That's a given. No one vacations at a refinery. People don't do these things. There's, I know you were in Dewshore just a week ago. The Harrington Hotel is owned by a dentist. He's ready to start pulling his own teeth out because the loan he took out for this luxury hotel, these mini suites for the industry is empty. there are so many businesses in Sullivan and Bradford County that are just going belly up right now because of this industry. This industry, according to the Pennsylvania Works Needs Assessment Report, which was done by Penn State and Penn College of Technology, stated that in this industry, 98% of these jobs are temporary or transient. They actually use the phrase boom and bust cycle. They use that. We had a short-lived boom, and now they're going for the sweeter spots and towards the west. So now we already know what the bust is going to look like. It's going to continue to get worse and worse and worse. When you weigh all that out, and especially that there's no immediate need to extract this resource at this time, how do you justify not supporting a moratorium until independent, comprehensive public health, safety, social and economic studies are completed and peer reviewed?
All right,
Excuse me,
Yeah.
we have New York, we have Maryland, we have North Carolina, which that blew my mind when they decided to put a hold on it. Now Illinois, you have Vermont that has outright banned it, and Pennsylvania has become the poster child for stupid around the world. I'm almost embarrassed to say that, and I know some other people in this room, I have met with people from Ireland, from France, Germany, Poland, South Africa, Japan, that have come to take the toxic tours of Pennsylvania so they can go back and not do this.
Exactly.
So what now, I know you've mentioned, in some of your writings, and I do read what you write, about, you want to see world-class regulations. What regulatory model are you looking at for these regulations that have worked, where the impacts really have been minimized? I guess what I'm saying is, how do we know, we know they can be better than what they are. Can they ever be at an acceptable level is the real issue. And until we know that, since we don't need this now, why not take a break? The gas won't go anywhere.
Ready? There's a lot there. Look, I'm probably not going to do it justice because I listened carefully, but I'm probably going to neglect to respond to some parts of what you said. So if you'd like to prompt me to talk about something I'm not going to talk about, please do. Look, in terms of where we're at, if shale gas was shut down, what happens? That's a good question to ask. Basically, Pennsylvania now is the second biggest producer. Shale gas is roughly 40% of all gas produced in the United States. The price of natural gas goes up a lot. It was $13 for 1,000 cubic feet in July of 2008. And it's come down to today's price, $3.50. I'm not predicting that were you to do that, it goes to $13. I honestly don't know, but I know it goes up a lot. Wouldn't surprise me if it went back to $13, 1,000 cubic feet. When the price of gas goes up, a number of things start happening. And if you're for this, you've got to come to, I think, grips with this and say it's worthwhile. And maybe it is. Depends on the value judgment. Maybe it is. The first thing is that lots of people start paying more if they have the money for winter heating. 51% of people in the U.S. heat with natural gas. I'll get through the winter fine, no matter how much they charge. for natural gas, and I do use natural gas at home. I have a very efficient furnace, 95% efficiency, which I paid for to try to make sure I use as little as possible. I'm one of the 51%. I'll get through it. But I know people who won't. The electric bill goes up also a lot. Probably $500 a year. For me, that's not going to cause me to lose my lights or prevent me from buying other things that my family needs. For some people, it will. It'll be, in some cases, losing the lights, and in other cases, it means less money for really important purchases that don't happen. Now, maybe you say that's all fine, but to say nothing happens is not right.
Well,
One more point. So that's on the cost of energy. The other thing that happens is you start using a lot less natural gas in the economy. You use less of it in industrial processes, and you use less of it to make electricity. Something else is going to take its place. And though I wish it was wind and solar, it ain't going to be. And it won't be nuclear, because it takes 10 years to build a nuclear plant. It'll be coal and oil. That's what will happen.
All right, well, I mean, for one thing, when I say a moratorium, I think everyone understands this. That's a moratorium on new permitting, on new wells. We're not gonna undrill what has been drilled. We're not gonna turn the valve off on what is in production. Right now, you have energy, which also Central New York Oil and Gas, and a few others that are scrounging for storage areas till they get the pipeline infrastructure to move this to market. They have more, the reason the price is down is because it's supply and demand. You have the supply up here and the demand is here. You know, that's why it's cheap. Also, if we do, God forbid, go through with these export deals, especially with non-trade agreement countries that we're negotiating, that's the case, it's pretty much game over for anyone who lives on the shale. Because we are gonna have to deliver that product, no matter what. And they're not gonna let regulations get in the way, they're not gonna let price get in the way, and what's gonna happen is the domestic price is probably going to go up. I'm not an economist, I've read some people predict 61 to 70 to 67%. Which means we are going to get away from our addiction to foreign oil, which is a joke, and we are now going to develop a new addiction to foreign-owned natural gas that is under our feet right now that we'll pay through the nose for, and then we're going to be happy that we have jobs working in the extraction industry so we can keep pumping this out.
Look, again, you know, I don't know what the price rise is, but there is no way you can do what you're suggesting and have zero impact on price. It's just not going to happen. I will concede to you, I don't know exactly how much it will be, but let's move beyond that, because I think we've exchanged our views on that. I think on the issue of jobs, look, this is something I'm absolutely focused on and concerned about. I don't believe gas drilling alone can bring prosperity. That's what Corbett has tried to do, and it won't work and never could work. No industry alone can do that.
Right.
This education, as big as it is, can't do that. Healthcare, as big as it is, can't do that. No industry by itself can, and both healthcare and education is much bigger than natural gas production industry will be in terms of its economic impacts to the state, and they can't do that. So I absolutely agree that there are issues around job creation and gas production. I don't agree with you now. You can show me some of the data, and I'll take a look at it and be glad to do that. But I absolutely don't agree that gas production has caused job loss. I haven't seen one study that says that. And so I think you got to. Every study that I've seen has said that it creates some amount of jobs from 12,000 all the way up to 240,000. Again, I reject the 240,000. I think that number is wildly inflated. So there is a certain number of people who are gonna lose their jobs when you do what you're talking about. And you've got to be able to look at those people and say, it's worthwhile. And okay, maybe you can do that, I can't. I can't look at somebody and say, your job was sacrificed, sorry, you're going to have some problems here. I can't do that. I can say I'm going to regulate your job, I'm going to regulate what your company does, I'm going to zone it, and I'm going to tax it, and I'm going to do that in a manner that tries to make sure that the risks and benefits are more properly
All right,
dealt with.
and once again, since you mentioned regulations, what regulatory model are we
Right.
looking at?
Well, that's a great question. And you know, part of it is my experience over 29 years working on these things. So I wrote 5 new regulations in 2.5 years and went to war with the gas industry to get at least 2 of them passed. The gas industry actually supported one of them and took no position on a couple others, but went to war with them on 2 of them. So I think that work was important work, but it was incomplete work. So for example, if you look at my drilling plan, there's 20 bullet points about various things that I would do. They include things like I've already mentioned tonight, like banning outdoor drilling waste pits. There's a whole long list of things that I would do, and including a big focus on air emissions, and taking the steps that you talked about to try to deal with flaring and some of the emissions from the equipment. It's right there on the website. There's 20 pieces, and I'm open to other suggestions. I'm open to other specific measures that would be useful.
Well, I think it's important that we acknowledge, you know, regulation, by its own definition, is you're going to regulate the degree and the rate of damage. That's what that means. And even though, and I have looked at your drilling plan, and I've looked at your points, and there's certainly an improvement over what we don't have now. But again, to go back to what Kevin said, we still have the time bomb underground as the well casings fail, and in time, they are going to fail.
Well, there's a lot of argument and fact on all of those points, and Kevin and I can talk offline, but maybe that's a way to deal with that question. There is a certain amount unknown, and there's a certain amount that we have information on, and it is a question of balancing risks. And this would none of us would be here tonight, if there were, in my mind at least, if there was a great fuel ready to go or technology ready to go. Say let's define that as solar with batteries that was at a price point that it was super competitive. I'd say yeah, ban that, ban coal, ban oil, ban nuclear. I mean, we've got something better. Why would we want to use any of that? Unfortunately, that's not where we are tonight, and that forces, at least me, into a conversation about what happens when you do X. What's the ripple effect? I think we had Dory, who's been patient.
Just for a little point of humor here, you mentioned who wants to vacation at a refinery. Actually, my father would. I remember as a kid, we were coming back from vacation across upstate New York into Massachusetts, and we went through this one small town, passed by a hospital that was there and had a power plant, and the smokestack was spewing black smoke. He pulled over and ran in there to tell them they were burning their fuel too rich. Okay, but my question, Act 13, there are 2 provisions in there. Right now, the zoning provision, which would basically strip the towns of their ability to zone the industry within their borders and centralize it in Harrisburg. I realize the Commonwealth Court has declared that unconstitutional, but they're pushing it towards to the Supreme Court. And also the medical gag, and I'm wondering on how you feel about those
Well,
two.
yeah, well, the medical gag, I gag on the medical gag, it's horrible. My wife is a physician, and, yeah, I've listened to everybody talk about it, including those who defend it and say it's not doing what some have concerns about. But I know doctors are risk averse, they get sued a lot. And they when there's doubt about their legal authority, what do? They become very cautious. And so the reaction of many doctors faced with that uncertainty in the law is going to be exactly what a lot of people fear. And you know, I just think it's a stupid piece of legislation or an outrageous piece of legislation, maybe both. I mean, if the proponents of it didn't really think it would create this concern and doesn't do that, if they honestly thought that, then they just made a very bad mistake, and therefore it's quote-unquote a stupid piece of legislation. If they're playing a game, then it's an outrageous piece of legislation. Either way, it ought to be repealed, and I would push for its repeal so that we make it clear that doctors have the ability to speak freely about these issues with patients and others. In terms of Act 13, this was and I've seen it in Harrisburg over the years. It's another example of really led by a Republican administration and conservative Republicans who say local government is really important and the government closest to the people is the most important. And then they turn around and start preempting local government. They did it in more than one example in my career. It's not the first time I've seen it. I believe in local government, and I believe that local government should have the right to zone or not zone. And let's remember, half of the communities in Pennsylvania don't have zoning.
Can I just ask you, just to elaborate on that, do you believe, let's say that it does go through, that the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania
Upholds it. Upholds the law.
Upholds it and says, yes, centralized zoning in,
I would want that changed.
in Harrisburg, just for the gas industry.
Yeah.
Now, to me, I'm seeing a slippery slope. So-
Well, that's where I was headed.
Yeah.
I mean, I believe in local government, and I believe that the municipal planning code that existed prior to Act 13 had a reasonable set of rules and policies in it. Very frankly, and because I'm not going to again pander to you, but there were, I think, 6 municipalities who outright banned gas drilling. That was illegal under the old municipal planning code. You can't ban any single particular business activity. You can't say no gas drilling, no forestry, no coal mining. You can't say that, and you couldn't say that under the municipal planning code as it existed before Act 13. But this industry has gotten used to a governor who's willing to say yes to anything, and they saw an opportunity and they grabbed it. The Superior Court said it was unconstitutional. I take court decisions very, very seriously. I frankly was surprised that they said that, but they did, and I don't know what the Supreme Court's going to do. I really don't. They've sat on this case for a long time. It's interesting to me. I don't know what to read into that tea leaf, which way they're going, but at a minimum, they're treating it very, very seriously. I would think there's a divided court at a minimum. If they were united in one side or the other on the case, you'd think they would come forward with a decision more quickly than they have. But I don't have any real information on that. Here's my experience being I've been a public official, statewide public official twice. Once with the Public Utility Commission and once with the Department of Environmental Protection. And in both situations, I felt there was a clear role for the state to have dominance in certain areas, certain things. And then there was a clear need for local government to make decisions that nobody in Harrisburg could really make. And that absolutely has to do with the siting of industrial activity. I don't know the community's geography and the community's layout. I don't know where the daycare centers are and et cetera, the critical facilities are, in the way that local government must know. The mayors and the borough council, they must know those things. And I respect their ability, I personally respect their authority to make wise decisions about that. And we have the municipal planning code that doesn't require zoning. Lots of communities have no zoning in Pennsylvania whatsoever. So that's their choice. And that means gas drilling or anything else, for that matter, can go anywhere. There's no zone. That's half of Pennsylvania. But